Well, howdy, kids. It's Friday, June 19th, and I'm back on my bullshit. I've had a couple of people ask me to make sure that I cover Juneteenth, the federal holiday, in one of these so they get a better understanding of what they're missing out on. Parkersburg is full of American history. Some of it's good, some of it not so much. One of the good ones is why this plaque is right here. Robert Simmons was a barber here in Parkersburg and wound up having a profound and long-lasting history for his contributions to our city. Mr. Simmons is alleged to have ridden on horseback all the way to Washington, D.C. to secure permission from Abraham Lincoln himself to start what would eventually become this school. The original Sumner School was not at this location, but it is historically the very first institution dedicating to educating children of color south of the Mason-Dixon line. So that's part of our American history that we did at one point in time in this country endorse and participate in chattel slavery. Now, I told you before, it's all about perspective of how people teach history. I'm really just going to go through some historical events, timelines, so that maybe you get an understanding of why the celebration of Juneteenth is significant. 1863, the Emancipation Proclamation went into effect. Did it free all the slaves? No, that's a very childish understanding of what happened. The Emancipation Proclamation affected only states that were under Confederate control at the time. April 9th of 1865, Robert E. Lee used a table runner. That's kind of like a tablecloth, but it's narrow. Used that to surrender the Confederate forces at Appomattox in Virginia. That wasn't the end of the story. The war was not over. That was just the surrender of Lee's forces. Because it wasn't until June of 1865 that the Army of the Trans-Mississippi surrendered and sort of became the end of the war. Takes a while back in those days for information to get places and for things to get done. June 19th of 1865, Major General Gordon Granger arrived in Galveston, Texas, one of the most remote places of the United States at that time. Now, he arrived there and started the process of enforcing the emancipation of those that were held in bondage, announcing that they were free and that the war was over. The official end to chattel slavery was ratified through the 13th Amendment in December of that same year. And it ended the last two strongholds for slavery, which were Delaware and Kentucky. The very next year was the first celebration of Freedom Day, Black Independence Day, Emancipation Day, what would eventually become Juneteenth. In the first 2 decades after the Civil War, there was a lot of progress made in our country. But then shit kind of went sideways, and we started worrying about the color of people's skin again. Two of the groups that were responsible for stirring things up in the early 1900s was the Ku Klux Klan and the United Daughters of the Confederacy. Y'all remember when I took you over to City Park and showed you the 1906 statue erected by the Daughters of the Confederacy to celebrate Confederate soldiers? And then there's the pesky little fact that we don't have a monument to the victors of the Civil War, the Union soldiers. Yeah, they were kind of responsible for trying to whitewash, or well, successfully whitewashing a lot of history. They spent a hell of a lot of time, effort, and money to promote what they called the lost cause, which was that, oh, it wasn't so bad, that slavery really was beneficial to people of color. They also promoted the idea that a Civil War was all about states' rights. States' right to do what? And unfortunately, a lot of people bought into that version of history. And honestly, kids, I didn't know what Juneteenth was until I was an adult. There have been a couple of resurgences throughout our history of celebrating Juneteenth. For the most part, they were localized and they were smaller celebrations. In 1979, the state of Texas officially recognized June 19th as Juneteenth to celebrate that turning point. Took 40 years, but in 2021, the federal government finally got on board and said, this is a celebration that we should have. Remember that whole thing about Memorial Day and the federal government finally getting involved in recognizing the achievements in our country? So I think Juneteenth is a wonderful day. It's a turning point in our history where we grew past our previous faults and our sins, and I think we should celebrate it. And here in a month, we are all going to celebrate our victory over the tyranny of England. Anyway, kids, that's all I've got for you today. I love you. I want you to take care of each other, take care of yourselves, and remember, our history is not always pleasant, and it's not meant to make us feel comfortable. But until we deal with the fact that our history has flaws and mistakes and problems like telephone poles and sidewalks, we're not going to get anywhere. And I'll talk to you later. Bye.